Well, we are in a World War III moment right now as President Trump pushes for peace, cutting off all U.S. aid to Ukraine. They had a big meeting today. Are they going to cut off all aid to Ukraine? I love that Senator Mike Lee posted that on Twitter X today, and he said, who supports this? Give us a thumbs up. I gave 30 thumbs up to that post. Europe is lining up, though, meanwhile, to go directly to war with Russia. And the end game, to me, is nuclear war, because what else are you going to achieve? Do you think that Russia is just going to roll over? The White House right now just made a statement saying that time isn't on Zelensky's side. So we'll get to the latest here in a moment. But first, we're learning more about what happened during that explosive White House meeting last week. According to the Daily Caller, the meeting was supposed to go just as any state meeting would go. A quote, "This was set up to be like every other state visit," a senior aide reportedly recalled. "This was an Oval Office spray. They'd be cordial handshake, take a couple of questions, and then they'd have lunch." But then all hell broke loose. The plan went up in smoke when Zelensky arrived and immediately was sort of sticking to a script that it looked like he had. He might have had earlier meetings with Susan Rice, Victoria Nuland before he arrived at the White House, telling him basically, don't go with this deal. Push for security guarantees. We want troops. We want weapons, which President Trump has repeatedly said he would not include in their mineral agreement. So why are you trying to torpedo this deal? You know what's in this thing. Then the fireworks went off in the Oval Office. And of course, we now know today, according to the Associated Press, Ukraine Zelensky says the end of the war with Russia is very, very far away. To which Donald Trump responded, "This is the worst statement that could have been put up by Zelensky, and America will not put up with it for much longer." It's what I was saying. This guy doesn't want there to be peace as long as he has America's backing, and Europe, in the meeting they had with Zelensky, stating flatly that they cannot do the job without the United States. Probably not a great statement to have been made in terms of a show of strength against Russia. What are they thinking? Trump said. Now, here are the warmongers that met this weekend. Of course, they all came together in Europe. In London, there's Zelensky.
Claire Daly is calling them a cover band for the Tony Blair warmongering efforts around the Iraq war. They're basically doing the same thing. They're lying to the world, actually, that stand with Ukraine is the new weapons of mass destruction, and they are trying to lead their people into a war. And again, we must remind ourselves that the people standing there, most of them have failed up. Ursula von der Leyen has never been elected by the people, was only named in elections after her party won. We're looking at, let's see, Antonio Costa, ousted for a Green Deal scandal in Portugal.
Mark Rutte,
who was ousted in the Netherlands as the leader there, promised to end his career in politics. These are the people who want war.
So Chris Rossini is the director of the Ron Paul Institute. He's been watching all of this very closely here as, of course, and co-host of the Liberty Report with Ron Paul, and staunch advocates against actually going to war. I mean, we're an anti-war show. So, Chris, great to have you here on the show. Welcome in. I just want to get your sense of where do you think things sit today? We saw all the back and forth throughout the afternoon. President Trump basically threatening to cut off all aid to Ukraine. Europe embracing Zelensky, looking to put boots on the ground now in Ukraine. Where do you think things stand now?
Well, I'm actually kind of pleased, I'm very pleased to see that the president is going to halt weapons sales to Ukraine. This is long overdue. And ironically, it was Zelensky that pushed him over the edge, of all people. Right. I was no fan of, the mineral deals and keeping a foothold in Ukraine, the most corrupt country in the world. We should just walk away from the place. And Zelensky is the one that helped to push that happen. So from that perspective, I'm very happy. And as far as Europe, well, they are acting tough, but they always have we need the United States. Well, that's not going to happen. And they may, in the previous world wars, have had we've had their back, but this time is different. We're not looking for a nuclear war with Russia, with President Trump. Thank goodness he's the one that is in office and not Kamala Harris. So I think things are looking up after looking so dire for so long.
Well, I'm happy to hear your confidence. Fox News from the White House said that the word on the street is that nothing will happen unless Zelensky apologizes. And here's why I don't like it. It's almost like when your girlfriend has a boyfriend, you don't want them to be together. And you're like, don't take his calls, girl, because you know what's going to happen. You're just going to get back together. I don't want an apology from Zelensky. I don't want a thank you from Zelensky. I want this to end. So is this a way where Zelensky can sort of Eddie Haskell his way back and just sort of weasel his way back into a weapons deal?
I'm sure he feels like he's going to have to. I agree with you. I think we should cut the ties clean, and then peace will be forced to happen, because we have dragged this war out with our money and our weapons, and so many people have needlessly died on both sides, but especially Ukraine, because they're fighting a superpower. And they weren't able to prevail despite all the money and all the weapons and all the money that's gone that they can't find, so to speak. So to put an end to this, it just has to end. But politics is cronyism, and they want minerals and they want to leave American companies there. Just get out of there, because the place it's nothing but trouble for our country.
We're going to talk about Europe here in a few minutes with a couple of other guests, so I won't bother you with the European side of this too much. I do want to get your Washington perspective, specifically in the warmongers. Your co-host, Ron Paul, has dealt up against these warmongers for decades. And so it was reported that before Zelensky sat down with Trump, that this had already been ironed out, that warmongers like Victoria Nuland, Susan Rice had already gotten in his ear. The old Obama regime, the warmongers who wanted to keep this thing going, the military machine, basically told him to scuttle this thing from the beginning. Does that surprise you? And how much of a wall does Trump face to deal with these warmongers in Washington who might try to subvert him?
Well, I mean, his first administration was hopefully a learning lesson for him. And it was a learning lesson for all of us, that you can't surround yourself with people that are at odds with your worldview. And if you want peace with Russia, you can't surround yourself with neocons that want war with either Russia, China, Iran, or anybody else. So I think perhaps he has learned his lesson. He had to put people in his cabinet that had to get approved. The Senate is not our best friend, so he had to have candidates. But so far, I think everything is going okay. But we still have 4 years to go, and I'm never comfortable with Marco Rubio. So I mean, we'll see what happens going forward. So far with Ukraine, I'm pleased.
What about economic deals with Russia, which is blowing my mind? RT over the weekend reported that possibly the Trump administration is interested in being an investor in the Nord Stream 2 pipeline after the Biden administration blew it up. And the first Trump administration had said, we don't want Nord Stream 2 to become a reality. We'll sanction it to death. And now the Trump administration is like, anything and everything that will provide that will provide cheap energy for our people to grow our economy. Is that the way you see it, or is there another way to see it?
Well, I noticed that Russia wants to end this war. Putin is making it so obvious, saying that make a minerals deal with us. We have more minerals than Ukraine does. Same thing. He wants to resume travel between Russia and the United States. This is awesome. Instead of going to nuclear war, we could get along with Russia, which is a natural resource powerhouse. That's why globalists have always wanted it for hundreds of years. They wanted to carve it up for themselves, and Russia stood up for themselves and saved their nation, kind of like what we're doing with our own nation, with President Trump. So I'm happy. We should get along with Russia, China, Iran. We could trade with anybody. There is no reason to put hundreds of thousands or even millions of lives at risk when we could just trade for whatever resources they have. So I hope the more deals that they can strike with Russia, the better, because that will make war that more unlikely.
Chris Rossini, co-host of the Liberty Report, and really great to have you here on the show. Director of the Ron Paul Institute. We like your way of thinking around here. Anti-war, get out of this corrupt country, bring our resources and interests back home to the United States. Thank you, Chris. Great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Could your health issues be caused by an invisible enemy, fatigue, bloating, brain fog? What if parasites are actually the real culprit? I know it sounds gross, but I was digging into parasite cleanses when I came across this video from this doctor. Watch.
What are the main differences between ivermectin and fenbendazole? These are two anti-pathogens used to treat parasitic infections and other similar types of conditions. They are used quite often in the oncology world to treat cancer. They both have as anti-pathogenic abilities.
Interesting, right? Did you know that 50% of Americans have parasites? They're everywhere in our food, our water, our pets. They secretly invade your body, wreaking havoc on your gut, energy levels, even your brain. And the mainstream medical system, they don't want you thinking about this because one great cleanse can actually change your life. The Wellness Company has a solution for you. Ivermectin plus mebendazole, a Nobel Prize winner now in a parasite cleanse combo that wipes out these invaders. Just fill out a brief medical intake form to get your 3-month supply. Lots of parasite cleanses are all over social media, but not the gold standard level from the Wellness Company. MAHA is officially here, and the Wellness Company is making these hard-to-get medications digitally accessible so you can live your best life. So head over to twc.health/redacted and use the code REDACTED to save $60 off plus free shipping. Don't wait. Cleanse your body and take back control today.
New study shows what is a consistent trend, that gender transformation only makes mental health worse. We're talking about surgical transformation or sex changes. We already knew that gender transformation or sex changes increase the risk of suicide. That's for all transformation. That means if you change your identity and your name and your pronouns, we know from this study that that increases suicidality. We now know from many new studies, here is just a new one coming from 2025, February of 2025, showing that a surgical sex change increases the risk of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and substance use disorders than those who do not undergo surgery. Well, who would have predicted that having an experimental procedure would make people so uncomfortable? Not only do these procedures lead to sterilization, they also create lifelong pharmaceutical patients. They are painful, and they increase a person's focus on passing as another gender. Nobody would want this for their loved one, to go around hyper-focused on how the world perceives you. This study surprisingly does not suggest that these procedures stop because they are associated with harm. It suggests the need for ongoing gender-sensitive medical health support for transgender individuals post-surgery. But here's the rub. There's no proven method of supporting people post-surgery, so that too is experimental. They're just guessing that they can do better by supporting these people, which again is experimental. So to my mind, that's very cruel. Maybe a kinder thing to do would be to tell people, we're going to totally disassemble and then reassemble your body. A lot of it won't work anymore. It will hurt a lot. It will make you anxious and afraid. And there is a large contingency of people who regret it. And you will have a lifelong need for heavy duty pharmaceuticals. And even after all of that, people will probably still perceive you as the opposite gender because human instinct exists. This is not, that would be the kinder thing to say. But instead, the study doesn't say that. It just guesses that there's probably a magical way of helping people when they actually go through this post-surgery. So it's a cruelty, but another data point that's consistent with what we already knew.